The woman convicted of murdering Mexican-American music star Selena has been denied parole.
For nearly 30 years, Chris Perez, the widower of Selena Quintanilla, largely remained silent about the deepest corners of their life together. In a candid 2025 interview tied to a new docuseries, Perez finally opened up, offering emotional and revealing insights that had never been publicly shared. Fans around the world were struck by the vulnerability in his voice as he described their marriage not just as a love story, but as a sanctuary filled with both hope and hardship. He admitted that out of respect for Selena's legacy and her family's control over her narrative, he had long held back until now. "There are things that need to be said," he explained, "not to change the past, but to understand what was happening behind the music." In the interview, Perez revealed how Selena had been dealing with mounting pressure in the months leading up to her death. As her fame soared, so did the expectations, from her label, from her father, and from the empire she was building. Chris described nights when Selena would confide in him about feeling pulled in every direction, exhausted but determined. The weight of being a global icon while trying to please everyone, especially her father Abraham, had begun to affect her emotionally. Chris remembered her breaking down during one tour stop, questioning whether she was truly living for herself anymore. These intimate accounts challenged the public's perception of Selena as only joyful and confident, showing instead a complex, human figure wrestling with enormous responsibility. One of the most startling things Chris mentioned was private letters and journal entries Selena had written but had never shared. These personal writings, discovered years after her death, contained her innermost dreams and fears. She wrote about wanting more creative control, doubts about whether the people closest to her had her best interests at heart, and even toyed with the idea of stepping away from the limelight to live a quieter, independent life. Chris went on to read selected passages that revealed hints of an awareness on Selena's part that cracks were forming around her, particularly with people she thought she could trust implicitly. In one such moving case, Chris reflected that certain warning signs might have been overlooked or set aside. He said, "There were people she had doubts about, people she trusted because she felt she had to," leaving the names of such individuals unmentioned. It exacerbated the already settled questions as to how much was swept under the rug in the events leading up to Selena's homicide. Beyond something that offers a glimpse into their love, the interview confronts one with the fact that even stars embraced by adoration can still end up feeling isolated and unheard. Yet behind the emotional weight of Chris's revelations lies a deeper thread, one tied not just to love, but to power, silence, and who really pulled the strings in Selena's world. For nearly 30 years, the story of Selena Quintanilla's death has felt tragically complete, until now. A long silent voice has stepped forward, and what it reveals pulls the curtain back on secrets buried deep behind loyalty, fear, and control. As new documents surface and familiar faces speak with unsettling clarity, the pieces don't fit the way they used to. Was something ignored? Or worse, protected? The mystery is no longer a mystery, and the truth isn't comforting. What unfolded behind that motel room door may haunt fans more than the crime itself. A father's control from the beginning of Selena Quintanilla's career. Her father, Abraham Quintanilla, maintained an unyielding grip over every major decision. A former musician himself, Abraham recognized his daughter's talent early and dedicated his life to molding her into a star. As manager of the band Selena y Los Dinos, he not only orchestrated her performances and recordings, but also dictated the artistic direction of her career. While Selena dreamed of recording English-language pop and expanding into crossover markets, Abraham insisted she focus on Tejano music to honor their cultural roots and appeal to their core audience. Despite mounting industry interest in her crossover potential, Abraham often delayed or downplayed such opportunities, believing Selena wasn't ready, or that the timing wasn't right. Abraham's strictness extended far beyond business. He was known to enforce rigid boundaries on Selena's personal life, especially when it came to romantic relationships. When Chris Perez joined the band as a guitarist and developed a romantic connection with Selena, Abraham was furious. He saw Chris as a threat to both the family's image and the business empire he was building. Despite the couple's attempts to hide their relationship, Abraham found out and initially fired Chris from the band, demanding Selena choose between love and loyalty to the family. This type of control wasn't just about parental protection. It was also a reflection of how Abraham viewed his daughter's life as an extension of his legacy. Even after accepting their marriage later, his dominance and decision-making never fully loosened. In early 1995, it was Abraham once again taking charge when the suspicions about Yolanda Saldivar began to rise. Employees had reported financial irregularities and had expressed growing concerns about Yolanda's behavior. Abraham went on to investigate the missing funds from Selena's boutique and fan club accounts. After gathering evidence, he confronted Yolanda with Selena and her sister Suzette. He instinctively went into protective mode and acted decisively, insisting against Yolanda. Selena's continued contact with Yolanda, much intended to recover critical documents, revealed the limits of Abraham's control and posed the question of how much real power Selena ever had in the running of her own life. As it stands today, Abraham is inextricably linked in the shaping of Selena's public persona. He has, all the way till present, the control over the music, image, and brand of the deceased through the various family companies. Critics say this ironclad management of Selena's posthumous legacy is frowned upon for its lack of transparency, sometimes choosing to avoid unpleasant truths. Documentaries and dramatizations tend to reflect a Selena reality of Abraham's own approval and not necessarily the most objective or complete picture. This tussle of upholding a legacy versus confronting history has also complicated what the world remembers about the Queen of Tejano. A love story in secret. Selena Quintanilla and Chris Perez's love story began not on a movie set or public stage, but in the quiet spaces between rehearsals and road trips. Their connection blossomed in secrecy during Chris's early days as guitarist for Selena, Y Los Dinos, in 1989. Selena, already under her father Abraham Quintanilla's strict watch, knew that any romantic involvement, especially with someone perceived as a rebellious rock musician, would provoke backlash. Their flirtation turned into a deep bond, and the couple was soon navigating a relationship built on love, but shielded by fear. Both were aware that Abraham saw Chris as a potential distraction, or worse, a threat to Selena's career and family image. This fear led them to keep their relationship hidden from everyone, including the bandmates they traveled with daily. The turning point came in 1992, when Selena, exhausted by the secrecy and emotionally overwhelmed by the pressure, proposed something bold: elopement. The decision was not made lightly. For Selena, marrying Chris without her father's blessing was both an act of rebellion and a desperate attempt to reclaim control over her personal life. It was also an emotional risk. Chris later recounted that moment in his memoir, saying Selena appeared nervous but resolute, torn between duty and desire. Their courthouse wedding was a mix of adrenaline and vulnerability. Two young people deeply in love, yet unsure of what consequences would follow. When news of their marriage inevitably reached Abraham, he was furious, though he eventually relented and welcomed Chris into the family. The damage, however, had already exposed the emotional cost of their secrecy. While preserving its secrecy has been quite trying emotionally for those involved, it has placed considerable strain on the band dynamics. In being ranked as Selena y Los Dinos, Chris and Selena had to compartmentalize their being, pretending to be nothing but colleagues while living an entirely different reality offstage. Tension crept in, especially among those who suspected the relationship's existence. With touring, things would only complicate. Anytime their cramped traveling quarters offered some semblance of privacy to sneak away and steal a moment here and there, they would only heighten their sense of alienation. All the while, the lingering unease that Abraham felt toward Chris would continue to impair the cohesion of the band, creating a knife edge of conflict that never truly dissipated, even when the marriage was finally an open secret. Subsequent interviews by Chris Perez revealed how external pressures would test their relationship, built on mutual love and respect. Living in the public, I became exhausting when trying to build a private life. He did admit to them having fights about anything from separation to not separating, not out of a lack of love, but rather sheer exhaustion. At that young age, they were learning how to handle being married, the fame associated with it, and family interference. Nevertheless, Chris commented that their bond was very real and powerful, a love that remained very much alive even after tragedy snuffed out the flame all too early. Financial red flags ignored in the months leading up to Selena Quintanilla's tragic death. Troubling signs emerged from within her growing fashion empire. Employees at her boutiques, Selena etc., in Corpus Christi and San Antonio, began to raise serious concerns about Yolanda Saldivar, the woman who had been entrusted to manage both stores. Staff members reported missed payroll checks, suspicious bookkeeping, and erratic behavior from Yolanda. Some described being intimidated or manipulated when they questioned her authority. Despite these repeated warnings, immediate action was slow. Yolanda's long-standing relationship with the family and her reputation as Selena's most loyal supporter shielded her from the kind of scrutiny a typical manager would have faced. This hesitation would prove costly. Selena's deep trust in Yolanda made the situation even more complicated. By 1995, Yolanda wasn't just an employee. She was one of Selena's closest confidants, someone she believed had her best interests at heart. Selena feared that removing Yolanda too abruptly could not only create internal backlash, but also harm the image of her brand and fan club, which Yolanda also managed. With the boutiques still relatively new and Selena's career at a pivotal point, she didn't want scandal or disloyalty disrupting the momentum. Her reluctance wasn't rooted in naivety, but in the pressure of juggling fame, business, and personal ties. She believed, perhaps too optimistically, that the issue could be resolved discreetly. On March 9, 1995, Selena, her father Abraham, and her sister Suzette faced Yolanda with piles of evidence on her financial mishaps. Within the internal investigations, really substantial hidden ones about supposedly missing and falsified documentation became exposed. Yolanda kept denying all counts of having done anything wrong when faced with evidence that could prove too staggering. Abraham ordered her withdrawal from all business operations immediately, although Selena ended, tearfully voicing her call to terminate her employment. It was more than just that. Fundamental monetarily tied documents were still with her, as they would be crucial for Selena's post-audit restoration of order in the companies. In walking against her family's wishes, Selena had actually scheduled a private meeting with Yolanda at the Days Inn Hotel on March 31, 1995, in one last attempt to retrieve those documents. That meeting was to be quick, a matter of procedure. It instead became her last. Selena considered that no matter what had happened, Yolanda would not hurt her. That trust, with the desire to defend her business and her reputation, was what compelled Selena to go alone. A very heart-wrenching decision pressed upon her, a last act of responsibility that, sadly, took her life. The signs were there, warning her from many directions. In the end, she paid no heed. The fallout didn't end with Selena's final breath. Decades later, the consequences of that day would resurface in a courtroom battle for justice all over again. The rise of Yolanda Saldivar. Yolanda Saldivar's entry into Selena Quintanilla's life began with what seemed like harmless fandom, but over time, it evolved into something far more insidious. A registered nurse from San Antonio, Yolanda first approached Selena's father, Abraham Quintanilla, in 1991 with the idea of starting an official fan club, eager to expand Selena's growing brand and connect with her audience. Abraham approved the idea, unknowingly opening the door for someone whose devotion would eventually cross dangerous boundaries. Yolanda quickly established herself as a passionate supporter, and within months, she was not only leading the fan club, but becoming a familiar presence at performances, events, and family gatherings. Her enthusiasm seemed genuine, excessive at times, but never overtly